Is it working? Yes, it is. So welcome to the fantastic conference center that we're in, a very big hall, and thank you so much for coming out today. We're going to be talking about, as you can see up there, technology and new opportunities for the music industry. We've invited a lovely selection of people from the German music industry, some from varying sectors, who I'm going to introduce in a moment. But first of all, I wanted to let you know that we will have some time at the end of the panel. So please get your question ready. We'll be passing around a microphone. And if any of you have something that you want to ask generally or specifically to one of these members or panelists, please do so. So I wanted to introduce our first panelist of today. I hope I say his name right. Oke Goettlich.
Yeah, it's Oke.
Oke
Yeah.
Goettlich. Oke founded the distribution service Finetunes in 2003. Started as a download store and now does really a little bit of everything, if you want to call it a 360 degrees solution service. We're moving on to Katja. Unfortunately, we had a panelist that had to pull out at the last moment, and so we've replaced it with the very knowledgeable and fantastic Katja Hermes, who's the Managing Director of Sound Diplomacy in the German office, who had a strong helping hand in organizing this year's conference. We're moving on to Steffen Holly, who works at the Fraunhofer Institute, if I can say that correctly, and used to be the CTO, some of you might know, of the streaming service Opeo. Andrea Götzke runs the Berlin-based New Thinking Communication Service, is a program curator, runs a lovely little festival in Berlin called the Torstrasse Festival, and mainly helps grassroots artists develop and leverage opportunities in the German music industry. So today we really want to talk about a few things. We want to talk about the finance side of the German music industry, the data side, the technology side, the distribution side, the sync side. There's many diverse facets to the German music industry. So there's a lot to get through, and we're going to try and get through as much as we can. But I thought a really good place to start for this panel would be the real-world economics and some of the numbers. If I can be totally blunt, I do find, like I'm going to get into the numbers in a second, that the German music industry is really in a thinking mode right now, just kind of trying to figure out where to move next, especially with a huge amount of disruption going on. So I think the most important fact that I came across when researching for this panel is that the German music industry, for the first time in 15 years, as of 2013, rose, and that was mainly due to digital music sales, 11.7% from 2012 to 2013. So the first time the German music industry rose in profitability in 15 years. And I think that says a lot about, or hinting, where the music industry is heading. Ad-supported and subscription music services increased 91% to $68 million. The single-track download sales fell for the first time by 4%. 21% of people still prefer downloads as opposed to 12% streaming. And all of this took music sales to 660 million euros. Having said that, 70% of the music industry in Germany is still very much reliant on the physical side of things, selling CDs, as opposed to the digital side of the market. Having also said that, and this might be a little bit jinxed in the sense, 7 out of the 10 biggest selling artists in Germany are German. So there might be a little bit of a correlation there. So I want to turn my first question, having said some of those figures to all of you, as an open question, taking into account those figures, some stagnating, some rising. Some would say it's hinting to a more digitized future, considering the rise in the first rise in 15 years. How do you see the German music industry, specifically the technical side of things, and overall the German music industry personally, and how would you define it at the moment?
Should I start? I don't
Sure,
know.
go.
Whatever. I think it has to be taken into account for the figures you presented that, for example, Spotify, as the streaming service that's I think mostly being used in Germany, has only started, I think, 2012,
Yep.
like 2 years ago, and there have been streaming services. There was a German streaming service before, so but they have not really been so strong. So I think it's only just starting to, for example, whereas in Scandinavia, streaming accounts for most of the digital music revenues
About 70 to
or
80%,
turnover, exactly. And I think this has a while to go still in Germany. And also one point is the demographics. Germany, in a way, is quite old from the demographic population. So lots of the music buyers and I think CD buyers come from the demographics of the over 50 group, and that are maybe not so much onto the digital side of things.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the sales with a 7 out of 10 in the top 10, that it's national repertoire. It shows that like this, it's often like Schlager music and like more this old-fashioned music, and that's like relating to the demographics. Those people buy CDs, and that makes it like that it's a strong market as well in physical sales. And it's a very conservative country still, and yeah, so.
We're always speaking about a conservative country, which on one hand side is quite right, but on the other side, I like the expression you were using, we are more or less in a thinking mode, and I'm saying this as being a digital-only distributor for 11 years in Germany right now. Still, Germany has not made a digital switch to a full extent, and the reason is because Germany is, as you were mentioning it, in a thinking mode. And the thinking mode is because of how disruptive can technology be and still helping artists and labels earning money on music. And Germany is slow or conservative, if you want to put it more negative, but I like the impression that we are more in a thinking mode than, for example, people in America who were just throwing out their music to every new service which is upcoming and having hard times to get money out of those services at one point, and needed to get it corrected by infringement calls on court and wherever, and it take like many years to get the money back, like whatever, Groove Shark, Last FM, or all these different things where money was just coming like 10 years later.
But Katja makes a strong point talking about the conservative side, because you would perhaps describe the German music industry as risk-averse, though, when it comes to exploring new digital opportunities, would you?
I would definitely say, being a risk taker myself by installing a digital distribution company 11 years ago, but the whole industry in Germany is definitely more risk-averse than other countries, yes.
Okay.
And something you have also taken into account is that the music market always reflects the total economic situation, and the economic situation comparing to all other European countries and also to the US is different in Germany. So if you're taking figures from Harvard Business Review, that the wages which are paid in the most industrial sectors in Germany are more than 60% higher than paying wages in the US, then people have the money to spend it on entertainment as well. And if you compare this to Southern Europe, which is really struggling with finance crisis and all that kind of stuff, this is also a reflection. But on the other side, I'm always, I'm completely from the technical side, even if I've done music studies in my first life. But if I'm going to the supermarkets, to the media markets, I'm a little bit afraid how long does it take to, if you're going to a supermarket and you're grabbing a 5 CD piece of Talking Head, complete discography, and you're getting it for €9. So at least maybe next year it is gone, and then you don't have that strong physical sales. So that you can do this one time. And this is something all majors are doing. you can buy everything from the back catalog for such small amount of money. For collectors, it's good, but...
And they're kind of, the digital music services, I'm not sure we'll get into that today, are kind of tinkering with that, the bundle packs and the family packs and the back catalog packs, which are making it easier for people to kind of jump into if they're using the service. I don't think a conversation about the music technology industry in Germany specifically would be a conversation without mentioning SoundCloud and Berlin. Berlin being, I guess, I would like to describe it, I've worked in Berlin in the digital music scene for many years, being kind of almost an incubator for the rest of Germany, some kind of shining light, where a lot of people around the world are still looking to Berlin for opportunities, but still, even though SoundCloud are very popular, waiting for it to kind of get to a very explosive kind of mainstream level. On one hand, you have the product-driven side, Native Instruments and Ableton, companies like that. And then you have the mainstream services in Germany like Simfy, Wimp, SoundCloud. As The Economist, I just wanted to say something that The Economist pointed out. A whole ecosystem exists in Berlin. You have artists, clubs, record labels, media, and you have technology. They go on to say, if their attention switched towards building mass market products that enable the masses across the globe to be more creative in their consumption and production, Berlin's place in the music industry could be far more significant. Would you guys agree or not agree? Stefan, maybe from the technical side?
Yeah, that's maybe correct, but also that there is a longer tradition in music technology in Germany alone. It's not only Berlin. At the moment, maybe you only notice Berlin, but there is also the complete audio development in Apple. This is Logic. It is in Hamburg. Or if you take in the audio development of Yamaha, which is Steinberg, it's Hamburg. And if you take into account that Fraunhofer is MP3 and AAC, so every device you have, there is German audio technology inside. So that's not only Berlin, it's just a popular peak. And of course, there's the freedom to do something. But at least sometimes you're going around in Berlin and you're meeting such a lot of people who just only have an idea without technology. And that's something also is not a good situation, because if you're starting a hype, a lot of people coming and want to be taking part of the hype. But it's, I think, a little bit far away from really being a really technology city. It's not that, from my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And we all have to consider that hype does not mean to be sustainable. Yeah, and this is something which comes to my mind very often, is that, of course, there are interesting business models around, but they are not yet working in a sustainable ecosystem. And this is something which we all have to think about, and where lots of different, even politician decisions or politic decisions have to be made. For example, how to fund young startups, young tech companies. And Germany now more and more comes into the situation, because of certain hypes, to realize, or politicians are realizing, oh, we have to invent into creative industries. We have to invest into creative technologies. We have to invest into the startup system. And I think recently Eric Schmidt of Google has been in Berlin and was just saying, Berlin will be a very interesting startup city, but still there is like no money around here where people are investing into those companies.
I think he also mentioned that we don't have nowhere near faster internet. Did you hear about that as well?
Exactly. And there was just an article yesterday where now some American investors are of course looking into Germany as a whole, not only Berlin, because they are seeing, oh, there are nice young entrepreneurs and startups, and they are getting it for 40% less of the investment sum than they have to invest in Silicon Valley or American startups. So, and I think this is for all around Europe an interesting statement, because it's not about Berlin or Hamburg or other cities. It's about Bilbao, it's about Barcelona, it's about different cities who are of course, artistic-wise, but also entrepreneur-wise, interesting enough to get some investment into it.
But I think what Steffen said, there is a history to the technology side of music. And you talked about logic, and these are some of the things that I didn't even know about. And I think it's amazing, and I'm impressed. But what, you know, the focus and I would say the limelight being on Berlin is because, I think primarily because of SoundCloud, and it's born and raised in Berlin, and I think there are a lot of other services, but I think the government, at least, as like Oke said, is really looking to see how they can leverage the infrastructure in Berlin and push it forward. I don't think a discussion as well would be useful without talking about the larger global music industry, because Germany, being the third largest music industry in the world, also plays a large role within the global music industry. So I wanted to talk a little bit, just quickly, on some of the most recent developments in music technology. Two, maybe you can comment on. I know they're very big, popular stories, but I still think it's interesting to see how they relate to the digital music tech side. Tom York releasing his latest album through BitTorrents. He recruited a bunch of Oxford students to help him release it and find a safe way of releasing it. And Bono, the iconoclast and the amazing, intelligent lead singer of U2, releasing their album through iTunes. And it got a very bad negative reaction. So I guess the question I'm asking is, do larger artists have more opportunity to experiment with such technology services? Because they're like, oh, we've made the money, and now we can just do some experimenting. And as opposed to maybe the smaller artists who are still trying to work out how to use the digital music landscape and how to explore some of the territories. I know we talked, Andrea, about the digital music landscape being too complex. So is there a kind of sense where artists are still trying to explore the market and they're not knowing how to do it?
Well, of course, also a not so known artist can release their music like the big ones, but you cannot expect to make as much money if you didn't have a whole industry career behind you that helped you build up this reputation and so on. So I think you're asking me about the experiences that we have in our consulting activities for upcoming artists in Berlin. I think many of them are quite tech savvy, we find, and they use like all the different like SoundClouds and Bandcamps, and they know like where to go. But in a way, I find often that there are so many of those. Maybe also connecting to what you asked before about startups and the music tech scene in Berlin. There are so many of those startups coming and offering new services for musicians, and I sometimes find it a little bit difficult. Like, it raises a lot of expectations. So you have like those 3 gig portals, like or 4, where you can find sign up and they help you to get a gig in other cities or so. And I always think, okay, so all the artists create their profiles, but how many actually do get to play then? Not saying that it's a bad thing. I just find there's a lot of expectation that's being raised through the different technologies that are there that may make sense for some, but definitely not for everyone. But everybody can have like a shiny Bandcamp page and a great, booklet, and they feel like they have it all together. But in the end,
but I'm also to follow on from that point, talking about the Bono and the Tom York thing. Do you think that there are examples that can perhaps push the industry forward in terms of opening up a new way of seeing how to utilize these digital music technologies?
There's definitely any new idea, I think, is beneficial. So, and experimenting with new ways of distributing music or connecting with fans and so on, I think it's a good thing to do that. Yeah.
Something which we sometimes forget is that music itself, it's not depending on the music industry structure. That's very important, also art itself. So if you're creating something really relevant today and you're finding your audience, it's today maybe easy to find your business model beside any structure which is existing. So there's an example which I've got from Andrew Dubber in London, which he followed the Foro de Echa Musica. This is a collaboration in Latin America. They are completely independent. They find their niche, they are financing their things, they are doing festivals, they are doing releases, just a community which is growing. And that's only an example which could happen in the future. Also, maybe we won't have tracks in the future, so there will be maybe an immersive experience which you follow. You're being part in an event, and if you're part in an event and the musicians creating the immersive music together with people are attending, then why should you concentrate on selling this? So there is no need to sell this, so there is no need to acquire rights afterwards or something like that. This is something which could happen in parallel. So the music industry with a structure is one side, but music can find its way beside this. But this belongs to the artist and the music itself.
Yeah, because you actually said, you basically asked my next question, or answered it in a way. People who are really creative and are pushing things forward, they don't care if licensing exists, they will try to connect with other people and create technology. They will find this value and they will not depend on existing business models. We do not know that what technology will facilitate this, which is essentially what you're saying. Okay, you work as the founder of Finetunes. And I would like to say from our discussion that we had previously that you're a little bit more positive or upbeat, considering you have a great service that you can offer to artists. So my question to you is, going back to maybe the first question as well, given the amount of negative attention that the digital music industry gets, you always get sucked into this abstract philosophical discussion. Music industry sucks, it sucks, it sucks. I know we've heard it before a million times. You turn on blogs, Hypebot, you read it all about it all the time. So please, give us some good news, maybe.
Okay, so some good news is actually all what you are reading about streaming and artist compensation, for example, is sometimes really blurring what's really going on. And there are different facts and different opinions, and they are mixed up with some not very knowledgeable thoughts because they don't know the deals which are behind it. So I can definitely say for a digital distribution company like Finetunes, where of course we are facing stagnating download a la carte sales, so they are not rising. Of course, if you have a nice album, of course, then they are rising as well.
Define the a la carte.
A la carte download, so like iTunes, your pay per download. Yeah. So this is a stagnating business model. But how is streaming compensating this? And we as Finetunes can definitely say that streaming is not only compensating, but it is already leveraging the revenues overall, which means that artists and special artists who are having a digital strategy are able to drive revenues and their income through streaming services if they are strategic enough to work out the speciality of streaming, which is of course in between publicity and PR and radio and revenue making potential.
I hate to put you on the spot, but can you give us maybe a real world example of how you've seen that happen?
So real world example of one artist, or so
traversing that territory.
Yeah, I mean there are, and because you were talking about Tom York examples or Bono's examples, and whether you need to be a well-known artist to be able to experiment in those cases.
In such a large scale.
In such a large scale, yes, but especially we work with young and small artists. We experiment with them, for example, making, let's name which artist can we take? An international one. So Theo Parrish, which is a nice DJ from Detroit, and he's, for example, releasing an album, and we are not releasing this album as a streaming on the streaming platform, but we are releasing track by track by track by track, one after each other, seeing exactly where it hits in which territories, making then some marketing aside in those territories, and then looking when do we put the next track on the streaming service. And beside, the whole album is just being available on download a la carte services. This is, for example, one strategy you can follow, especially as Theo Parrish is usually an artist who hates digital, and he wants to sell 180-gram vinyl only, usually. So you have to make something which interests him, because it's a different format he is working with. So it's a format he does not like very much, but still give him the opportunity to create something in this format or within this format.
Have you, any of other of you have like real world examples based on traversing the territory, giving an artist a more positive exploitation based on digital music models? It's all right if you don't, I was just interested. Or working with the digital music side. I wanted to, since we're getting into the technology side, I wanted to turn specifically to Steffen, because I know he works at a technology institute called the Fraunhofer Institute for basically, I think, if I'm correct, the managing director was partially responsible for creating the MP3 or the lossless conversion. And when we talked primarily about the innovation of the digital music environment. So I really wanted to get into the latter end of our conversation, which was really about the metadata. And I think that is where you see the future of not just the German digital music industry, but the overall music industry. And something I read recently on Hypebot said that 10 million listeners give us 1 billion pieces of data per week, which I think is quite astonishing. And that was from the Echo Nest. So now we're heading into that kind of territory. Maybe you can elaborate a lot more, because I found that really interesting, the metadata side and how we can implicate that, exploit that, and use that in the future.
And first of all, you have to remember that Echo Nest was bought by a distribution company, which is Spotify, and not acquired by the content industry. So in the future, if streaming will be dominate, this will be in 5 years from now. They will have all the data from all the users, they will have the promotional channels, they have everything, and then the question is what they will dominate to the content industry. So this is something you have to think if you are a content industry. And the other thing, Oke scratched a little bit, because he said when you're releasing track after track and then you're looking in which country is it working, or what is, where is the impact. That is something the content industry should definitely open up. So why is it not possible for me as an artist to having a dashboard at Universal Music to see all my digital sales, streaming, everything on one hand? It's possible. So there is not a question of technology, it's a question of support to the artist. So for instance, Cobalt, for instance, doing that. The funny thing is that Universal started in Sweden a kind of a spin-off where you could drop in your releases, and there you have the dashboard. But then they're going only through this, and then selecting an artist which they may took over to the major label, and then you don't have any dashboard available. So if you think about Google, when they investing, I think at the moment it's 75 million euro, which they have invested in Content ID, which is used for YouTube to identifying the right piece of music which is played on that content platform. That is a huge amount of metadata they are creating, and they have the data. So if the content industry is not willing, and that is something I see that there is no will, if they don't accepting that you have to invest in data, they will depend on all this data from other companies, and then they are toast. That's the situation.
So the content is king, but the data can definitely help the content industry?
Of course, the data is everything. So if you don't know where your customers is and then where your sales coming from, you don't know nothing. And if the other people knowing everything, they will dictate you. That's quite simple.
So where is it heading though? Like at least, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, this is really an interesting point, and we all have to be aware on one thing. If somebody knows all the data, this leads to a negotiation with those companies. So if, for example, then Finetunes wants to have a new deal or a different deal with Spotify, or Universal wants to have it, Spotify is telling, okay, on this kind of deal, we want to reduce or deduct like 10 or 20%, and therefore we are giving you the data you are not having invested in, which means it puts again the value of the music down if you are, as a content industry, are not investing into those kind of area.
How do we move beyond that conversation? Because I think, Steffen, like, you make a good point by saying there's no will there, but we need to create that relationship, that dynamic. Often a lot of the conversations I've had with people in the music industry constantly talk about the metadata side of things and how incredibly exciting it can be, the potential. So how do we move beyond that conversation and get them to see the potential?
So I'm talking to this side, I think, when I was at OPIO with all the collecting societies, I see data coming in and out, and every time I scratched my head how this could happen, because it's so old-fashioned and it's so full of errors, and there is no interface in between. And I don't have a solution, because I'm now talking to offering metadata solutions to content industry, and I always know the result of a talk, because everybody finds it interesting, but when it comes to developing something, doing something, it costs money. Oh, why costs it money? Because engineers are also producing IPs. That's not only music IPs, there is also technology IPs, and we don't want to work for free. So there is no free lunch.
Yeah.
Whether you have to invest in data and data structure, or you will die.
So you are kind of admitting then that the industry is conservative in that sense?
Yes, and we are calling our institute the Institute of Digital Media Technology. The funny thing is that we don't get that much money from the content industry, because we're getting more and more money and research from the industry itself. Because with the new Industry 4.0, there are so much media data available from all these sensors, visual, audio, all that kind of stuff. And you can analyze this data with the existing technology we have, and you will get paid, because they understand the power of data they will receive from this technology. So that's why I'm sorry to say this, because my heart is music, and I'm still a musician. I'm playing that, and it's sad to see that.
So that's why we're talking about these obstacles. We know that the digital music industry is growing 16% year on year, which I think is astonishing. So somehow there is some kind of coalesce going on, but as Steffen pointed out so well, there is still a conservativeness or an outlook, at least. When you're talking about the content, you're talking about, can we say the majors? Is that what you're talking about, or you don't want to?
Not. So I'm also at Finetunes with my stuff, so I appreciate that service. But I also know that it's not possible for a service just like Finetunes to invest a lot of money. So we did some studies with Phononet, and we did studies with Finetunes as well. But there were only studies. We could show that could happen. And on the other side, you have these big initiatives like the Global Repertoire Database. This will be shipwrecked, I promise you.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Pardon?
Can you explain what you mean by that? It will be shipwrecked? What is?
Yeah, if you have a look at the data which is coming from all the collecting societies, and I know what data they have, if you're really looking on metadata design, that's really bullshit. And they have to bring it together. That is, immediately, if they find out what they have to do and what kind of investment they have to do, they will immediately jump off and say, oh no, we don't do this. So maybe we will, in some months they will say, Global Repertoire Database will never happen.
Does it have something to do with something you said, Steffen, to me in a conversation, which is maybe it doesn't, but just interested to throw it out there anyway. If someone comes through this door and mentions the word music in their pitch, talking to an investor or a VC, I will kick them out. I'm so bored of that.
This is a quote from an investor in Berlin. So that's I think that's the result of the hype in Berlin. That's not in total. So of course, music services, music ideas, creative ideas can do a return on investment. There is no doubt about it. If you have the right music and you have the right ideas, that's not a problem. But the scenario in Berlin is that somebody is knocking on the door of these public-private investment companies and coming in and say, oh, I want to do something with music, and that's why he's bored, and that's why this quote is coming from. So first of all, you have to think about your real business model, and then you have to prove it with not only with an idea or something, with an app or something like that. You really have to stick or nail the problem. Then you will get the money, of course.
Sure. Solve the issue. Yeah, Katja?
Yeah. And I guess it's important that it goes beyond that just selling music, like all those approaches, like where can you find artists at night, whatever. If it's like a real idea, like for example, Nego Sounds, like there are a lot of startups in Germany or in Berlin that work with music, but they have like new ideas how to use music, so it shouldn't be, I guess that's often the topic, that just the apps are very boring, that are like looking like, hey, how do I find my the best song ever in an app, something like that. The rating system, that's like boring now, but if you have like new ideas and new just developments, and then it can still be interesting to invest in music.
And something Andrea was mentioning before, it's so complex that most of the investors are really not interested in investing in music business, because we can take the example SoundCloud again. Of course, there is lots of investment money in, but at the moment they now have to realize, oh, we have to pay licenses, we have to get all these things done. So this is somehow controversial to the point where, of course, investors at some point want to see an exit and not like more money to be burned in the future.
But then there's something to be said about the complication, or at least the journey, getting to solve that problem. Because I know when I was trying to do licensing work at a music app, it was a nightmare. It was just an absolute nightmare. And I know we talked about that, Steffen, as well, when you were talking to distributors, labels and all that. The same conversation had to be had, and you have them 100 times. But, okay, sorry, did you want to say something? No. I wanted to move very quickly into more of that kind of complicated area. Okay, and Andrea, you both said, okay, specifically, licensing is sometimes the reason for delay in progress of the German music industry. You also said that the German music industry has a value-keeping mentality. And then you wanted to say something which I really love, which is you called GEMA disruption haters. Now, for all of you out there, I'm not so sure you know how it works with the YouTube scenario, but it's basically, I don't know how much profit it might have cut out of the industry. Some say it's good, some say it's bad, but it's almost impossible to watch most videos on YouTube because of a deal that hasn't been struck between GEMA, which is a local collection society. So I love that. GEMA are disruption haters. Andrea, on the other hand, you said Germany is not as open to new opportunities as perhaps Anglophone territories. So my question to both of you is, in an ideal scenario, or in a picturesque world, if technology was to be leveraged properly, and we could use it in an optimized way, which is obviously where we're trying to go, how could it help artists access more exploitation opportunities and sync opportunities?
I have to get back to my quote.
Please.
GEMA is a disruption hater. Of course, this is one side of the medal. But why am I calling them that way? Is because they are keeping the value of musical works very high. So it is good for the artists, it is good for the labels at the moment. But it's maybe not good for the artists, and especially new talents, that in Germany, you are not able to watch YouTube videos of them. In Germany, all YouTube videos are blocked. So Germany has a disadvantage in building new talents to UK, France, Italy, Spain, which means all our local repertoire cannot be heard in Germany by the teenagers because the content is blocked because GEMA has no deal with YouTube yet. So this is what I mean by they are on the one hand side disruption haters, on the other side they are keeping the value for artists very high. So I appreciate that they are keeping the value high because we all working with new talents and working with artists once that they want once make their living out of being musical producers if they want to be, or if they want to make their living out of it. On the other side, as mentioned before, this is really a disadvantage for the German music market in general.
Mm-hmm. Andrea, sorry.
Yeah, I would agree to that. I think, I also think that, well, it's good to kind of keep the standards high, but the collecting society really needs to start, or it needs to think more like to approach also the digital companies and the possibilities there in a more open way, and experiment a bit more with those things and get closer to them, because like this way it's, yeah, okay, we cannot see YouTube videos, that's really a problem, and this with all the other services and all the other startups that haven't even like approached GEMA for a deal, because you know this will come at one point, and then this will be more and more and more and more important, and then it's really it will be important that there are no negotiations that lead to some point. Also, I think the technology companies maybe have to come closer to the collecting society. I think they just need to. There hasn't been a point reached in Germany where those two worlds have really come together.
Steffen was talking about.
Yeah.
And this is a bit because of cultural diversity as well. So the US approach is definitely a different, or the US technology approach is definitely a different one than maybe we in Europe, having an approach solving problems first and then starting to build a business. In the US it's like innovation first, and we are doing even if it's not really allowed at that point. And there are positive and negative aspects on both sides, no doubt about this. But we really have to see what values do we want to keep for artists, for our society, because in this little fight, YouTube, GEMA, for example, of course, lots of discussions are happening like, oh, this is a threat for society, and now we are putting the whole Google society debate into this kind of YouTube GEMA debate as well. And I think these are all things we will solve in the next 5 years. What does society want? What values are our societies wanting to keep on which level? On the personality level, like what do I want to show the world of myself, but also on the values of real money for artists and labels and so on. Mm-hmm. And this debate is still definitely massively ongoing.
Sure, and it will keep on going. I mean, you have to see, when you talk about Germany, you always have to see the historical point as well. That's like with data and security and this kind of like services that technology is approaching. I mean, that's like a huge topic now, but you always have to bear in mind, if you want to do anything in Germany, that it's like a massive historical issue with technology.
So there's a lot of kind of cultural obstacles. I think Germany is so unique in that sense. We've got the YouTube GEMA thing, we've got the privacy data issue, which we constantly talk about. We've got the unwillingness by, as Andrea pointed out, sides not willing to kind of come to the meeting table and talk more. But I really do hope that it changes, because the data or the economics tells a different story. I mean, 16% year on year, first rise in 15 years, so something is changing. But like in Anglophone countries, like Andrea talked about, there's a different approach or mindset. Do we want to synergize with that mindset? Or do we want to perhaps still have our own German, unique Germanness about the way we approach solving a lot of the issues in the... It's a cultural question.
Trying to link both sides here now is... There is a positive aspect, which is what you call this Germanness. It is in our DNA to really or at least it is in the DNA of people after our big historical failures we did as Germans in the past.
What historical failures?
Yeah.
I'm joking.
that we really not having maybe these kind of ambitions of world domination.
Right,
yeah?
right, okay.
And this is
You're scared to be number one.
There are definitely and it's definitely a self-confidential problem, and we really are not in this mood for historical reasons, because we showed the world how bad we are.
And on the other side, we have a very, very strong mechanical engineering that is the strongest in the world.
Sure, yeah.
And if you look to China, you can ask the question which machines they are building the products. So these machines are mostly made in Germany, and this is a big industry process, and that's why also the German economics and the German funding for research and all that kind of stuff is mainly going to these core elements. Not automotive is not the biggest is really mechanical engineering. And this shows, if you put together, then the second one is automotive together with engineering, mechanical side, there you have these just maybe more technical, haptical thinking personality, but
minutia, yeah, okay.
Yeah. But only also to say something which is quite optimistic, which is a side note. On Monday, I will have a meeting which is organized by the public radio station and TV stations in Germany. And they will sit the first time. So this is old school. Now, we are not talking about online. We are talking really about broadcast. So the national broadcasters sitting together with the responsible persons of GEMA and talking about a monitoring system which they would like to install together. This is something they are doing together with us, and that is maybe an optimistic outview to it could happen. If you're really going for them and trying to ask the same arguments again and again, and now they are ready and they are meeting on Monday.
Yeah.
So that's the side note.
I think it kind of plays into certain areas of trust, confidence, which you talked about. Communication is very essential, which also we're kind of getting to the end of the I've just been told 10 minutes left, so we're going to get to questions, but maybe we'll make this the last question for you guys. This is more directed at Oke, but feel free to join in, because I think the politics of the German music industry is essential, and we've already kind of given a backstory to that. Oke, you said major labels in Germany decide nothing on digital licensing. Managing directors of German majors do not drive decisions. Managing directors of German majors do not drive decisions which service will be licensed. It will be decided in London or America. Germany lags and slows and takes months to get feedback from, say, the headquarters in London. So there is some type of top-down governance going on, if that's what you really want to call it. Is it constricting the current state of the digital music industry? Because when I worked in that for many years, I found the conversations were very different. And to move forward or progress based on, as well, what Steffen was saying as well.
It's a very pragmatic problem. I mean, imagine you're starting a music startup in Spain or in Germany, which is somehow the same to a certain extent, because it's the same problem in Spain than in Germany. And you say, hey, I'm going to Universal or Warner and want to license music of them. It takes ages. Aside the money aspect, that they potentially want some advances or shares into your new startup, it takes ages for a decision they have to forward to the headquarters, which are in London or which are in UK or America, and therefore Spanish local repertoire or German local repertoire, which of course is not the highest priority in UK or in America, gets potentially not exploited as fast as it could in Spanish music startups or German music startups. So this is what I wanted to express, that when it comes to digital, it's more of a global business, and the global business more or less is driven by the managing directors, which are not in the territory where potentially the startup is sitting. So this is, for example, with SoundCloud, the same as it has been with Simfy in the past, or Simfy was a German, or still is a German streaming service, and therefore there is a lack of exploitation possibilities, or a time lag of getting things done.
Steffen, would you agree with that proposition?
Yeah, there is nothing to add. So my experience with licensing was then to go directly to headquarters, trying to talk with them, and that was really sometimes a frustrating job, knocking on every door again and again and again and again. Yeah. I'm happy that I don't have to do this anymore. Yeah. Really.
Yeah, me too. So in summary, I think we're going to turn to questions, but I think we're at a very, very interesting, unique phase in the German music industry, worth about $1 billion to $2 billion, third largest music industry in the world. But something which still rings really true in my ear, something that Steffen said, which is the real creators don't really care about the licensing, and they'll move forward anyway and create incredible opportunities. And I really feel the same. And I think regardless, because you said the music industry is separate to that, which I think is also very true, that innovation, disruption will always happen regardless of what's going on. I hope that the German music industry catches up to speed and we all get to the table, as Andrea said, and we find a way to further the discussion and find solutions. So having said all that, we have a microphone. So I would love someone out there to kick off a question of some sort. Anyone have a direct question about some of the topics we talked about today, or anything at all? I'll be forced to ask another question. No one at all? How many of you out here are from the Spanish music industry? I'll be interested to know. Okay, quite a big portion. Just interesting to know. So I think maybe we'll make this one of the last questions, just turning to you guys. Frank Brigman, you said that there's no real central person, or you said a lot of the decisions are made outside. So Frank Brigman is the president of Central Europe, Universal Music Group, International, and Deutsche Grammophon. So he is a very important person. And he said, there is virtually no technology vendor or platform operator who can afford to do without an attractive offer of music after a period in which the main focus was on technological innovation. Content is king again. At the same time, music is not only attractive legal content, which is available on the net and elsewhere, but has also become an interesting investment again. Is it an interesting investment again, at least from these big people like that are looking at it? I mean, we talked a lot about already that there's a resistance.
I sat on a panel 8 years ago, and this reminds me of sitting on the panel 8 years ago, because it's still the same fairy tale of only content as king. And when I sat on the panel, it was 8 years ago, the way that to show people how technology works, you needed three things. Either you're making in porn, you're making in football, or you're making in music. And but this is 8 years ago, and now we are in a phase where data is getting more and more important. And this again reminds me of a discussion I had 11 years ago when I was founding Finetunes. Somebody told me there is only one thing that matters. Metadata are the crown jewels of the business. So I'm in contradiction to Frank Brigman saying it is about metadata and not about the content alone.
Yeah, which I think we've unanimously agreed today. Steffen, what is the Fraunhofer Institute working on at the moment? Maybe you're not allowed to divulge some of the details, but is there anything exciting that we can expect from this?
So most of all, there's maybe technology from our partner institute, which is doing the AAC standards developing. There will be I think in the near future there will be adaptive streaming, so you don't have to press a new button if you're listening to in a small bandwidth environment, or you're listening at home. So the same signal is in one stream, and if you have good bandwidth, you get a CD quality with this stream, and if you have reduced bandwidth, you're getting maybe only 16 kilobit per second, and it's the same quality just like you hear with 96 now with AAC. So this is something, adaptive streaming is maybe a part of the technology which is developing. And on the other side, there is also the monitoring side. So as I said, we are in the not monitoring per track. So something we are monitoring is with machine learning algorithms. Is there music or is there something else? And at least the program which is have to pay the tariffs to collecting societies is only paying to the music part of the program, not for the other part. And that's quite interesting, because at the moment the broadcasters are saying, oh, we play around 60% music, and writing this down with a pencil. And the collecting society is saying, no, we don't believe that. You have to really automatically record this. And this is something we are doing with machine learning process. You can identify whether if it's music or not, and that is just around 98 to 99% accuracy.
I think that's fascinating.
As an example.
Andrea, maybe I think we're going to close out from the artist perspective. So the discussion, as a last question, what would be your main thoughts when the discussion you have with artists? So when you sit them down and they talk with you, and you say like a really new artist, and you're entering into discussions about how to traverse or drive this territory, which by all how to drive this territory, how to get through it, by all accounts we've discussed today, is quite complex. Is the discussion really intent on the digital side of things, or are you just talking about the old school side of things, how to build a live career? How much of the discussion is really based on the digital music side of things, and are they hopeful?
I think it's one part.
It's
one part, but a lot of discussion is also about live touring and all those kind of things. I think all those things are still important, and actually I think that's where more of the the questions are more. I think that from the artist side, the digital stuff is quite easy, but it's more complicated when you need other people to book you a gig, or when it comes to licensing and all those more difficult questions. It's where they need support, not so much where to tweet or to upload stuff. I would say, yeah.
And you find partners to help you with that.
Sorry?
You find partners to help you with that?
Yeah, sure, definitely.
I think it's very important to mention that, this whole social media, and that's pretty global, so people know what to do. But in Germany, because we work with a lot of artists that want to, emerge in Germany and find the right people to work with. And it's just important, going back to the conservative country, that for example, that you always know where you, as an artist, that it's maybe different in every country. So Facebook is pretty big in Germany, but Twitter is not, for example. And these are things that you have to take into account when you enter Germany as a market, that it's different, that there are differences between countries.
There's another thing that came to mind, not related to the artist, but I just thought about when it comes to the digital and physical market. It's also a matter of broadband in the countryside. It's maybe a bit far-fetched, but I just thought about music buyers and age groups, and I just thought about my mom, and where she lives in the countryside, she can't watch a YouTube video without interruption.
Buffering.
Yeah.
But that's
So I think that's also a thing that's important if we think about streaming and music, digital and physical markets.
Getting physical access to the music, they can't, I think we've all learned a lot today, at least I have, and I think it's, as I said, I reiterate it again, we've heard from many different sides of the music industry, digital as well, and I think we're learning that the German music industry is an extremely unique one, and definitely has a narrative that sits behind it, the past, the cultural diversity, and also moving forward, how it decides to solve its issues. Having said that, I want to thank all my panelists today. It was great to have them. It was great to have you guys here. So Andrea, Steffen, Katja, Oke, a round of applause.
Thank you, Ari.
Thank you.